Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Arctic Pauper Show. I am your host, Arctic Ghost, and this is a deck that I should have brought you a long time ago, but kind of fell to the wayside. This is Blue Red Puzzle Control, which was originally created by ML Ovbo, or however you pronounce your name, dude. I'm really sorry that I can never get it correct. I'm pretty sure I don't anyway. For those of you who don't know who ML Ovbo is, he was one of the innovators for the deck that I love to play a lot, which was Blue-Green Paragon Drake Tron. He was one of the big innovators for that kept on, changing it and everything. But Lobo is a very well-known deck builder in the Pauper community. He's all over Reddit, always discussing, always being part of the talk about everything. He's an overall nice guy, an overall very good player. This is a deck that he created specifically to compete in the original season of the Community Pauper Challenge. Unfortunately, due to time constraints and his schooling, where everybody knows school is more important than Magic, don't forget that, unfortunately, he was not able to compete. He will, however, be a part of Season 2, so do look forward to that. He's already confirmed that he is in for Season 2, so that should be fun. This is a deck that was also played by Littlefield in the top 4 of the Community Pauper Challenge Season 1. Unfortunately, although this deck helped him go to 3rd place, he unfortunately lost to Z Magic, and in what was a very, very mind-blowing game of Magic, to be honest. It's very, very cool. I think the VODs are up on YouTube. I think Shane put them up. If you ever want to go check out that match, I highly suggest it. Basically, this is the equivalent of blue-red control if you were to take, like, blue-black teachings that wins by Curse of the Bloody Tome and has no creatures, no nothing, just Curse of the Bloody Tome to win with, and you turn it into a blue-red deck. I call it blue-red puzzle control because the big card that is played in this deck is Pieces of the Puzzle, but I'll get into that in a little while. Basically what happened was between Littlefield and Z-Magic is Z-Magic was playing Coldotha Boros, and Littlefield was playing this deck. Shane and I were commentating, and we quickly noticed that past almost said Fury, Flurry of the Horns, Littlefield unfortunately did not have any other win condition. He didn't have Curse of the Bloody Tome, he didn't have Jace's Erasure, which is what Lobo originally was using. So we noticed that if a Copperhead actually landed on the battlefield, if it successfully resolved, and 4 of these only makes 8 tokens, as long as Z could actually get 8 mana, he could never lose the game. Because he was never going to draw more cards than the puzzle control deck, especially on the play. So unfortunately it didn't really work out because I believe that Littlefield also cited out his deep analyses. I think is how you pronounce it. If you want to talk about plural, could be wrong. So there was literally no way for him to actually win the game. So unfortunately, that's how it ended, which was pretty insane actually. So first up are the counter spells to talk about, which are Dispel. This is a control deck that wants to win a counter war, so you want to have as many ways to win a counter war as possible. But Dispel, it also helps counter a plethora of spells. Helps counter Gush, helps counter spells, helps counter things like Accumulate Knowledge and whatnot. That's really what it is. Counter spells, or kind of like a counter spell type of strategy, I think, in Pauper doesn't really work all that often because the spells are so cheap, or because this doesn't counter a Mole Drifter. So if a Mole Drifter resolves, you're gonna get far behind. So a counterspell based strategy doesn't really work out because eventually you're gonna run out of counterspells to use. You want more proactive spells. So you don't want to load up too much on counter magic. I think that's why you don't really see like a mono blue control type strategy where you have like 4 deprives, 4 counterspells, and things like that these days. Delver Blue doesn't really count because you run 4 counterspells, but you also run very cheap creatures to be backed up by those counterspells. And you also run Spellstar Sprite, which in its own right is a counterspell, but it's also a creature that wins the game. you know, when you look at decks like Blue Black Teachings, you know, you see 4 counterspells. Sometimes you only see 3, and you see a couple negates, maybe some dispels thrown in there. The deck relies more on reactive spells, not proactive spells like counterspells and stuff like that. So that's why in this type of deck, you only see 5 real counterspells, and you see like a couple of dispels to help fight through a counter ward, a counter like burn and stuff like that, and you see exclude to try and get over on the either Mana Teferi, over on you know, creature decks. But that's neither here nor there. Either way, you know what the spell's for. Counterspell, just because it's counterspell, this is after all a control deck, and you are pretty good at getting double blue. You have 1 Logic Knot. This could be a deprive, but you don't ever want to be behind on your land drops because some of your spells are quite expensive. You do play pieces of the puzzle, Deep Analysis, Exclude, your win condition is 5 mana. So, I chose to put Logic Knot in the deck. I think the original deck list did not have 5 counterspells in it. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah. It's a non-bow in a way with Swirling Sandstorm, but come on. You're going to be putting in so many cards into the graveyard. I've never had a problem. So, take that for what you will. Which, by the way, this is actually 29 cents now. Surprisingly enough. I had to buy a third one. Like, I think 3 or 4 days ago I bought my third one because I was like, you know, I want to test the third one in here. In the main deck. When I was messing around with this deck a tiny bit. And, yeah. This is 29 cents now. When it used to be like 3. It's pretty insane. Because this is not a card that, you know, we've seen very often. But this is a card that actually has been making a lot of waves in Pauper. But I'll talk about that later. So yeah, so you have the Logic Knot as an extra counterspell. And then you have Exclude, which is remove Soul or Essence Scatter, whatever you want it to be. But you kind of don't mind having the extra mana cost so you get to draw a card. You don't really mind that in this deck. Moving on to the draw spells, you got 4 Preordain, which are better than Ponders, because you want to push cards you don't ever know you're not going to want to the bottom. Like, if you're up against the Blue-Black Teachings deck, you want to push this to the bottom, or you want to push this to the bottom. You want to push Dead Lands to the bottom later, you want to push this to the bottom, etc. You know, things like that. Yeah, for Accumulated Knowledge, just because they can draw so many cards, and they combo with pieces of the puzzle. You have Deep Analysis, also because it draws a lot of cards, but also because it combos with pieces of the puzzle. And then you have Pieces of the Puzzle. So Pieces of the Puzzle is 3 mana source. It's a sorcery, unfortunately, that says, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Put up to 2 instant and or sorcery cards from among them into your hand and the rest of your graveyard. So, really cool things that you could do is, let's say you get like 2 lands, a Deep Analysis, a Flame Slash, or Preordain. You can take the Preordain, you take the Flame Slash, and you're bidding 2 lands you don't need, and you're putting a Deep Analysis in the graveyard, so you're only losing half a card. So you're losing half a card, but you're also gaining back half a card. But you're also gaining back half a card that you got with Pieces of the Puzzle. So it's kind of cool in that interaction. It's kind of cool in that way. I've been very, very happy with it. I don't play 4 in this deck. I cut the 4th a long time ago. Was never unhappy with cutting the 4th. I think 4 is just too much, but that's just my opinion. Because, again, it is sorcery speed, so I don't know how much you want to do that. Hooray for car alarms. Whoop-de-doo. Whatever. Oh my god. Okay, hopefully that's done with now. Anyway, so next up are the removal spells. You got Dual Shot, and you got Electric Trickery. The reason for Dual Shot is it's a 1 mana instant that deals with 2 target creatures. You know, like 2 different types of Llanowars, 2 different types of fairies, things like that. As where Electrickery is always 2 mana to deal with the whole board. So the difference between 1 and 2 mana can sometimes make a very big difference. Whether or not Dual Shot's actually still worth it, I'm not sure, but it's been pretty good, so I've been keeping in the deck. You have 1 Firebolt just because it's basically 6 mana to kill 2 creatures, or 6 mana to deal 4 damage. It's not terrible. It's it's basically either a Fire Blast or 6 mana to kill 2 guys. That's basically what it is. Then you have Flame Slash, because it's basically 1 mana kill just about everything in the format that isn't a Gurmag Angler, or Fenrir Marauder, or anything like that. So, the reason that this deck doesn't play Skred is because you instead take advantage of Izzet Boilerworks being able to return your Radiant Fountain and your Swiftwater Cliffs to gain back life, which I think is a lot more usable than playing Snowlands and playing cards like Ash Barrens and things like that to be able to play Scred. Because really, in this type of strategy, Flame Slash does the job. So that's really the reason you play Flame Slash, I think. And then you have Lightning Bolt. I'm not going to explain this. You should know why it's here. One Swirling Sandstorm, just because I thought about, well, let's add one of these Wrath of God type effects to the main deck, and it's been really good. So 3 might be a bit much, especially when you can dig so far, but the aggro decks, and aggro is a big representative of what Pauper is these days, so I think one Swirling Sandstorm in the main deck is fine. And then you have your big win condition. I have played many games where I keep thinking that this is not enough, and it turns out to be enough game 1. So, yeah. For 5 mana, you get 2/2/3s with haste that die to almost everything under the sun, but by the time you win, you're going to be so far ahead of your opponent, and your opponents can be living off the top, that you can actually get to 10 mana, cast 2 of these in one turn. Your opponent just cannot deal with them. I have definitely gotten to games like that, so don't be fooled by this card. The mana base is kind of straightforward. You got 8 islands, you got only 3 mountains because you only need a few mountains out. You got 8 islands because you rely mostly on blue. You got Izzet Boilerworks to try and accelerate your mana. Oh, excuse me. But also to return, you got your Swiftwater Cliffs. Your dual land also gains your life. You got a couple Radiant Fountains to help you gain a little bit extra life. Whether they should be in this deck, I think you kind of need them if you're going to live against aggro decks. They actually help out a lot. As far as the sideboard goes, it's pretty straightforward. You got one more Electricity in case you need that effect against token strategies, fairies, anything that have you. Firebolt in case you need that extra effect against like slivers or anything. You have 3 Hydroblast against the red decks. Burn is not a good matchup for this deck. I'm going to tell you that right now. Burn is not a good matchup. You do not have enough stuff to handle Burn. You have a lot of dead cards against Burn, so do be warned about that. But, I digress. So that's what that's there for. You got Pyroblast just against any blue deck. You got Gorilla Shaman against Affinity. Affinity is not the easiest matchup in the world, even for this deck, because you can often get a lot of slow spells in your hand. So you kind of need Gorilla Shaman. You got 2 more Swirling Sandstorm in case you're up against an aggro deck and you got to go hardcore control. And then you have Curse of the Bloody Tome in case you're up against a deck that has an overabundance of removal, such as like Huldo the Boros and things like that. Decks where being a completely proactive / reactive deck and just having your Curse of the Bloody Tome be your only win condition is probably your better off way of doing it. Now here's the big problem with Curse of the Bloody Tome. You cannot get it off pieces of the puzzle. So, in matchups where you bring in Curse of the Bloody Tome, I sometimes side out one piece of the puzzle just so that I have less of a chance of binning one of these. It's possible that there should be 4, but I wanted to have 2 Swirling Sandstorm to be able to go up to 3. So I kind of hedged my bets and went with 3 Curse of the Bloody Tome. So yeah, that's really the reason for that. So this is the list. It's not perfect. It's definitely just kind of an entry level to show you what this type of archetype can do. We're going to take them to a couple test matches. I can tell you I've been having decent results off camera, so take that for what you will. I can tell you that I've seen this deck have good results off camera, so take that for what you will as well. So what I plan on trying to do is show you the ins and outs of the deck, show you how the deck functions, show you how well it, how consistent it is, show you kind of how the matchups go after sideboard. And, the usual stuff. So we're going to take you to a couple test matches. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you join me for the test matches. I will see you soon.